I'd like to welcome you, Daisy, to this first conversation, and I hope this will be the first of many conversations that we may have over the course of doing these videos for the Australian New Zealand Journal of Family Therapy. So I'm meeting today, I'm on Kaurna land in Adelaide. Daisy, whereabouts are you?
I'm in Noongar land in Western Australia. Thank you, Sonia.
And we're meeting today because you have put together this special issue for the autumn edition of the Australian New Zealand Journal of Family Therapy. And you've put this together as a guest editor around COVID and how that has shaped our field. Would you like to introduce yourself to the viewers and share with us a story about how this special edition came to become?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Thank you for having me, by the way, Sonia. This is great. So we'll get a chance to converse, to talk to each other about this process. This is great.
Yeah.
The experience of this, it feels almost like giving birth to a child, actually, wow. Because it took about 8 to 9 months, wow. Like together the COVID edition. It originated with my intention to approach and check in and connect with fellow practitioners, family therapists in different parts of the world. I've been very fortunate and privileged to have worked with a lot of practitioners from different parts of the world. I myself am, of course, South American, Peruvian. I speak a couple of languages. And my main language, my primary language, is Spanish. I've been very privileged to have worked in different settings. And of course, I'm very passionate about family therapy. Initially did teaching, then went on to doing psychology, social work, and then of course counseling, family therapy, just really fitting with me so well. As someone from a collectivist society, very much culture where the collective is the key, the most important part of everything, our community. I was just due, probably 2-3 days before I was due to depart to the IFTA conference, which you'll be familiar about. It's like one day before I was due to depart, I found out this COVID has occurred, and I thought this would have been something fairly minor that would just blow out of, just fairly quick. And of course, I didn't realize what it was going to occur, and so that led to my intention to connect with other people and checking how they were doing. So that's what it came about.
Wow. And with that kind of checking in, were you surprised that it wasn't just going to blow over? Like, what happened when you realized that COVID was going to affect many, many people and particularly our clients? What was that like when you realized?
Yeah. So of course, I guess as a systemic therapist, as a family therapist, and as an authentic therapist, I guess, in general, we want to ensure that we are in the collective realm, that we are connected with how we are going throughout. So I thought my interest was to check in with the practitioners to see how they were traveling in a different context, and then write a collaborative paper with other clinicians from different parts of the world, which was published. It was about March. It was published, of course, in the Australian New Zealand Journal of Family Therapy in June. And so that came about. And from then on, in my discussions with, of course, the chief editor, Leilana, and he invited me to become part of, this process as a guest editor. And of course, all those issues that were apparent as practitioners, they're very much in our clients. So they didn't know the uncertainty and all those kind of things, the unpredictability and all that we'll go into it, I'm pretty sure.
Yes. And so when you started writing that first article, were you kind of surprised about when you were checking in with your colleagues, the severity, I suppose, in the way that some countries had to shut down really quite strongly and quickly, like Italy, for example, and some countries didn't respond at all, perhaps?
Well, it's interesting, right? In trying to check in about the similarities and differences, I guess as a practitioner, as a person, just as a human being, there are surprises, and we're going to be surprised. And certainly COVID is one of those major surprises of our lifetime. Nonetheless, I find there's always similarities as well. And it's about our how we are able to gather that and how we access that ability to connect with the other people, clients, and fellow practitioners alike, to be able to access that part. You know what I mean? So I don't know whether I'm making sense, or particularly with minority groups. I work extensively with people from different backgrounds, different culturally linguistically diverse backgrounds. As myself being from a culturally linguistically diverse nation, so very much.
And how did you see your colleagues in different parts of the world coping with COVID?
Yes. So one of the things I said in the editorial, that would be dismissive of me not to mention the challenges that our colleagues, our family therapists were dealing with, because each context was so different, right? And there were different factors impacting on it. So it was really challenging. Now, I noticed a few of them have lost their funding for the services. This was here in Australia, but also overseas, particularly. There was a lot of, universities, they stopped, they just had kind of the how can I say, the bread and butter kind of courses, and they kind of like had to cut down. And it was like very distressing for academics, colleagues of ours, other services, practices that were, other practitioners that were practicing as well. They felt forced to close down.
Wow.
Because the partners maybe stopped working, their funding stopped, and so they had to be the main. It was just really challenging. And clients were terrified on the scale of what to expect. Like, do I come into session? Do I not come into session? So I guess it asks us to access different parts of self, and being human most of all. Human, just connect the human sense, human to human connection. So that's been one of the key things. But there have been differences and certainly similarities. All of them. And one of the things that, of course, a couple of other things as well, there were quite a few of our colleagues that were going to contribute towards the edition. And some of them, for example, were too sick. Some contracted COVID themselves and were too sick. It was extremely sad, and others who perhaps use humor as element for connection, and through teaching and connecting with clients in their practice, they could no longer see the funny side or the light side of this situation. So they lost all of that. So it really pushed us to the extreme, and continues to, because the uncertainty is still there.
Was there a bit of a time when you thought, oh, this is not going to go well? The vaccine seemed to be long time away. Now we're 12 months on, really, from the news breaking in March last year. How was it through those really hard times for you?
Yes, there certainly were those moments of whether we'll make it or not. And there was some stress from my part to, I've got to make sure I get this done. And I also want to make sure that we don't miss out on spreading the word and being able to tell the story to our fellow, family therapists, systemic therapists around the world, sharing those experiences. Like I often say, we need to do before we need to be before we can do. So these kind of things was so important for me. So there were some hiccups and things that occur, and I go back into working with things, and we made it happen. So that was really fantastic. Thanks to all the people contributing as well.
Yeah. So Daisy, could you take us through the contents and what readers will find in this special issue around COVID, and why, what was important about some of those articles, particularly to you, and to be included in an issue like this for our colleagues around the world?
I guess so. There were 9 articles altogether, and they were from different parts of the world. As I said, there were a lot more that were due to come, but because of those extenuating circumstances that I mentioned earlier, they couldn't, which was very sad. And it was a lot more culturally diverse as well, given that, so it was disappointing. Nonetheless, so we were able to get some from Italy. So there was quite a bit about, so the initial one started, the first article is actually, how can I say this? So it's an extract. It's about 2 different interviews I conducted with with Harry Aponte and with Maurizio Andolfi. So I, again, like you, very interested in, again, the voices and conversations. I've conducted quite a lot of cross-cultural interviews, conversations with different, students and colleagues. So I thought that would be a great start, because it gives you a bit of a sense, it sets the scene of the experience.
Right.
And particularly interested, because I had more people as well who were interested in contributing through interviews, conversations rather. So I was interested in the sense of the personal and the professional, how they were impacted on both levels, and also within their cultural perspective and the context, how they were touched, and how that had influenced or impacted on the way they conducted services and the way they taught, because a few of them are academics. So they provided therapy, the way they conducted, in their teaching, in their as supervisors and all that kind of thing. So I was curious about that. So that started with them, with, of course, very privileged of having had Harry Aponte and, of course, Maurizio, who I know well. So I actually trained with Maurizio quite a few years ago in Italy for a few months. So we were able to get an idea about what happened for them as individuals and as in their practice as well. They talked a lot about the opportunities and about the challenges and the opportunities, and of course being part of telehealth, being part of the opportunities. What challenges? So in each area there were opportunities and challenges, because it's a new experience. Anything new is going to have some challenges, of course.
Also changes of format in which we conduct family therapy, and therapy had to be, invented almost overnight when we started doing things differently. Yeah.
The content. So all the other. So we had an article by from Italy, a colleague of mine as well. Paradoxical effects of COVID. COVID, again, the challenges and the opportunities of COVID. We had, and particularly the authors focused on the different areas, and particularly also telehealth being one of those. And again, how as practitioners we are not pushed, but kind of asked to be flexible. And this is something I often say, and this is something that I've become aware of, being aware of, and that's one of my aims, to be able to focus on that there's the sense of predictability is no longer there. So COVID has taught us that. There's no predictability 24/7. You know what I mean? The sense of unpredictability, the sense of permanence is not also has been shaken. The notion of permanence. So there's been all these surprises. So then it teaches us to need to be flexible and to access different parts of self. So of course there was a model by another set of collaborators, the Dan model, which is working with couples.
Right. Tell us a little bit about that. This is the first time I have encountered the Dan model. Could you explain a tiny little bit about what that is?
Well, the DAM model is basically a way to work with couples and trying to, again, create that flexibility and being able to work extensively with them, trying to capture it. So it has different layers and different stages of working with them, facilitating the process. This set of authors, you know, the clinicians here, from the ISCRA Institute in Modena in Italy, they had created this DAN. They have been working with the DAN model for a little while, but they were able to shift their the way they work with, in terms of trying to include it or try to bring in the COVID experience into it. You know, so basically working with, again, stress, challenges, and all those kind of things. So I guess it was a good fit to do that. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then you moved to Japan. Then we moved to Japan.
Yes, Japan. That's right. So again, contributors, I mean, we're familiar with a few of those authors, and you know, who work extensively with, of course, in Australia. Again, the discussion was about connecting with the challenges that families in Japan went through, and you know, the huge impact, and part of that was also part of the government stance, and you know, the I guess the measures that actually impacted highly on the families as well, you know, through isolation, depression, like different stages, you know, life stages. And something that I mentioned in my own article too about the life stages is just taking a hit on the way how life stages, and also how we celebrate things, how we, you know, marriage, all those kind of things. It just changed completely how we see it and how we connect with it, you know. Yeah. Yeah. And so we've got, of course, the next one is the another article by someone from the US, Matthew Seligman, and he again presents this idea about working ways. A lot of these articles have examples, case studies as examples, to just give you a bit of an idea how you can work with this, you know, with these ideas, these approaches. And so he presents again a few examples, really, case studies about how to work well. He's very much looking at the sense of, you know, creating hope in a place where there's no hope, kind of thing, you know. So very much creating, you know, providing some examples in that realm. Yeah. And of course, the next one is the other in the UK, China. So the collaborative effort by Sing and Sing, and about, again, working, you know, again, the strengths and the benefits of the opportunities that it creates. So basically, Sonia, a lot of them, while in different ways, are discussing the different areas, how we've been touched, our teaching, our practice, the way we conduct supervision has been impacted, and trying to find ways of working with. So again, accessing the flexibility, creativity, you know, working with just trying to see with the organic self, and being able to bring those ideas into force. So just because a lot of the times we tend to plan as practitioners, obviously we need a structure.
Right.
However,
and I wonder, needing a structure. I was curious about what you said before about this intersection between the personal and the professional, how COVID kind of brought this more to the fore in a way, and suddenly we need to be flexible. Do we also need to be more mindful sometimes of that personal professional, or did that veil come down a little bit sometimes in our work with clients? Do we need to bring more of the personal in when we're all dealing with a global pandemic, for example?
Yes. Well, yes. We need to be, in order, in the times of COVID, let me call it, in the COVID times, yes, we still continue to be professional, providing that support to our clients, because they certainly need someone who's somehow, when they in despair, if they see us completely startled, they are not going to feel as safe. Nonetheless, we need to be human, and we need to be able to connect with that humanity. So I think it's about allowing ourselves to elicit these things to emerge. The idea, the notion of the self of the therapist and the person of the therapist, but becomes particularly important more than ever before during COVID times. And our ability to access ourselves and every part of self and be able to bring it into practice. And it becomes more organic. I feel like I'm more organically doing that these days. And in one of the article that I put in that I've also presented, I presented a couple of examples of my approach, the cross-cultural approach, working with that. And so the idea of culture was able to bring some comfort, be able to bring some calmness in a very highly overly stressed environment, for two different people, two different clients, but just gives you the idea about we're able to access that. While I work, for example, with cross-cultural issues, and as I said, the idea of being more authentic, and the idea of being allowing more the organic state to come through, that this allow me to access other parts of myself that I didn't know I actually was able to access. So that just became organically born, so to speak,
And did that surprise you? What was that like, Daisy? What was that like for you? Did that surprise you?
What was that like?
Yeah.
Oh, I actually, it touched me deeply, and so so it touched me deeply. I've kind of presented that. We can talk about it another time because it can be quite complex. I've got a particular model that I work with. It's called my culture. And I look at those elements to try to gather it as part of assessment and as part of creating, ongoing practice. But I also use it in my teaching and also supervision, really. So those kind of things. So how was it? I was able to see with one of these clients, for example, I could not believe how she was the trauma, the predictability, the terror, the stress, the anxiety of COVID and the measures that came with it as part of it had set off physical symptomatology in her to the extent that she couldn't function. So she felt disconnection from her body, her brain. She had lost the sense of even language and all those kind of things. Is absolutely out there. And so through language, because through affinity with myself and my work, even though she's Australian, this Australian woman, and she was able to, and through trust, again, that self of the therapist, she was able to connect through language. So again, if you're connected with neuroscience and all, how we can recreate that, and of course, creating neural pathways in our brain being plastic and all that kind of thing. So she was able to, through Spanish, through just a new language, she was able to find a way to communicate and connect with self. I thought it was extremely powerful. Wow. So I felt like I needed to share that story.
Yeah. So many more possibilities that maybe come from creative sources that we really didn't realize that we could invent until this COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
Did you get a sense as well in and I'll get to the other two articles I'm interested in, number 8 and number 9, but did you get a sense of people coming together more because we're all in this together, or did you see still those effects of isolation, of exclusion, of the some of the hardships of separating people? like there seems to be two levels of responses. Some communities were able to come together, and other communities, the existing problems were magnified and further um, like further disconnecting of people from each other and from their own skills and knowledges, I suppose. At least that's what I saw. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I experienced that very much in our own communities, and that was very much what was happening in other contexts as well. And that was, well, I guess with COVID, having worked with trauma extensively, and particularly with groups that are constantly hit by trauma on an ongoing manner, minority groups, refugees, humanitarian entrants, you name it, people, families encounter domestic violence issues, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess the sense of trauma, the key aspects being unpredictability, uncertainty, the not knowing when is to come a lot of the times, particularly the most vulnerable, the groups, the most impacted, I find. And so the kind of the not knowing where it's coming and when it's coming it's one of the biggest things. And I guess with COVID, however, we tend to be, particularly being very privileged in our society where we live in Australia, of course, we only see if we as practitioners make a point or a decision to work with minority groups or disadvantaged groups, we'll be able to see that reality that of the ongoing living with trauma, I guess COVID has taught us or has helped us to connect with that idea that trauma can be ongoing, it's relentless, and COVID has done that. And even, for example, in Australia, we've been very fortunate, as a lot of people would say, and I'm sure you hear that a lot, and would say in terms of the infection rates and all that kind of thing. However, the underlying uncertainty, stress, the anxiety, the fear, it's there no matter what. And it comes in different shapes. So people react differently. And that survival mechanism, which again can be to unite or to divide. That's been one of the things that's been quite interesting for me. Some of my international students were extremely hit, for example, they came, very welcome in Australia, but then they felt quite, they feel, discriminated against and all that, particularly the more different they were in terms of race, in terms of language, the harder they were impacted. Some of them became homeless, they lost their job, all those kind of things. It's just and whether we come from more individualistic ideology or a collectivist kind of ideas and that kind of thing, but nonetheless this has taught us to recognize, acknowledge and respect that we are collective beings, and then we need of each other to survive. You know what I mean? To make sense of things, to unite, to survive. Now, when we are not used to that sets us what you were talking about, the idea of the uncertainty, the survival of the fittest, where we are going, no, I don't agree with that. I'm just going to push it away because that's going to bring some safety. I've got to keep some normality and some control over this because otherwise it's all too much. So it's certainly united and also separated. So often what you hear, and we've heard a lot of, is it's either united us or it's brought the best out of us or the worst out of us, and that very much relates throughout all the nations that had discussions with, and all the people that have collaborated, or those that couldn't at the end collaborate, but had conversations with them as well.
Wow. So where are we at now? We're now 12 months on. How do you think these learnings and the learnings of the authors in this issue might help support people just meeting families for the first time, or students coming out into the field post-COVID?
Right. So this, again, will be able to put it into perspective about because we are able to connect with our own selves and are able to really realistically look at the big picture of things, despite the despair and the pain and all that we are able to put it together. And I think this has been a key time in our lives as practitioners. I feel that we can really give of ourselves more than we ever have. And I think really connectedness, the deepest form of connectedness occurs that when we are able to access our own humanity, our own selves, you know. And so I think that's a primary thing. And I've had phone calls and emails with people that have seen the first article, their reflections, and they said, you know what, that helped me so much cope. That helped me cope. Just like that, just sending me, and I was really touched by that. And they say, look, I could not work until I that really helped me just doing that, and I could move forward and practice again. So I think that's so important to do that, you know, and be particularly not afraid. I know it's hard for some practitioners that haven't accessed their own self, or just really being able to trust themselves to bring how can I say about being organic, you know, because we are so used to sitting with our own biases, and we think if we see it or we think that way, or if we perform or we write this way, that's the only way, and that's not true. You know what I mean? We need to be acknowledging and respectful that even in the culture thing, even in the context of this edition and the contributions, there was a lot of my time I spent supporting those ones that are English is not their first language, so some of the authors. But to me, that's a wealth for us. It's a privilege to do that. I don't see it as a, you know, so to me, the nuances that are born out of culture and that, you know, the English not being the first language, I think that's beautiful. So they want to lose all of that. You know what I mean? Otherwise, you lose the essence, and that's important.
And it had me think of actually the word steadfast. When you were talking about couples that are separated, and I've got a few clients where this is the case, or children separated from their parents in different countries due to COVID. And we used to assume that physical closeness also helped the relationship. And now we see that if there's no physical closeness, people are still steadfast in their relationships. And we're still steadfast, I think, in our hopes of continually learning as practitioners. I'm thinking about as I'm listening to you, but I'm also reflecting on the COVID experience and thinking that physical distance no longer can be necessary to part of a system. And perhaps the way that we're looking at systems in family therapy as well is accounting for the qualities that are important in relationships rather than the system of people living in one place. Things like that.
Right.
So it has me think about what's the glue that holds us together, and how COVID has shaped that glue a little bit more.
To connect with that, the simplicity as well, simplicity. And of course, part of the strengths of, like, you know, there's a lot of loss and a lot of isolation and sorrow and grief and sadness as a result of people isolating, of course, and lockdowns and all that extreme. And I work extensively with that. There's also the idea for those people, and of course, people with domestic violence, or that particularly challenging. There are, on the other hand, some opportunities that, you know, opportunity to connect with the simplicity, because we tend to overthink about families and what they have to be, what they have to look like, and how we have to be and what we have to look like as parents, as you know, and all of that. But this, or spouses, but this is just brings us back to basics, I guess, you know. So it's again that gives you that opportunity to reinvent yourself. The same as with online teaching and online therapy, same kind of thing. We're able to access resources we did not know we could. Obviously, there's a lot that is lost, which is, you know, the ability to connect face to face, and like we were talking about with Maurizio and you know, Harry, for example, about the idea of touch, you know, like even as part of that. That's not possible online. However, you're able to access resources, like seeing bits at home. Like if you're excessive, you are going to the clients' homes and going to the students' homes, and able to connect with those things that you would not know. So it really helps us to be able to see and just reinvent ourselves and be able to see other aspects that we would not have acknowledged or thought about, even considered.
Right. And sometimes they surprised us and sometimes they saddened us, I think.
Yes.
So many dimensions in this topic, so many dimensions to be continually explored as well. I'd like to really thank you, Daisy, for this opportunity to speak with you today. Is there anything that you would like to pass on to our viewers and our fellow family therapists, our students, about or anything really about this issue, about COVID, about your practice?
Some of that, but really about COVID, again, uniting. We are experiencing one of the most challenging experiences in our lives, and we are all touched by it, no matter what, and no matter how little we may think, because it's not just the infection rates, it's the whole gamut, the whole thing, multi-layered issues that come into account. And so we need to connect with each other. We need more than ever to be united. And I really encourage people to really collaborate and form partnerships. I just strongly believe in that. And also accessing other parts, maybe collaborating with other professions. There's so much we can gain from, and we can help our clients and our students so much more when we are able to do that. So really not feeling so, while we all have this idea about safety in familiarity, we need to be also perhaps connect or think about safety with the uncertainty as well. You know what I mean? There is something about it, like sometimes it can be the unpredictability that can teach us and help us grow a lot. So really about that, just trying to sit there and not be over prescriptive. And kind of sit, at the level where more organicity, if there's such a word, exists in our practice, in our counseling rooms, in our academic, in our classrooms, and all those kind of things. So it's really key.
So there's so many wonderful takeaways, I think, from our conversation today, and I really valued it to reflect on COVID with each other, with family therapists, and I think we can continue to do more of that across our profession. So thank you so much for your time today, Daisy.
Thank you so much, Sonia. Really appreciate it.